Hello, everyone. My name is Amy Obshirsky, and I teach history here at Union. And I'm doing my pre-webinar video on effective discussion board forums and how to tie them into the outcomes. So we have several tools when we're starting our discussion board forums, but the first tool is our question, our base question that the students will see and answer and interact with. So what I do to form my discussion boards and help make them more effective is I start with a reverse question web. So many of you may have used like question webs or main topic webs, and you would start here with your question or your main topic, and then you would branch out in how to answer that central. So what I do is kind of the reverse of that. I'm going to work my way to the discussion board question, and I'm going to start with my goals, and some of those will go into the discussion board questions. Some of them will go into the other tools that I'm going to talk about that I use to do effective discussion boards. So I went ahead and used an example from one of my actual classes, and that's Black Codes and Jim Crow law. So the first thing I want them to do is be able to define Black codes. I want them to discuss the rights given and taken away by Black codes. I want them to place Black codes in the historical context of the Civil War. I want to encourage academic standards. I want to discuss and look at the transition from Black codes into Jim Crow laws. And I want to encourage them in using primary sources to give support. That'll help model for them when they're writing their own papers. So the first thing is the question that I develop, and you'll see already some of my goals are met in this question. Post a paragraph. What are the Black codes? Use specific examples from our readings, and then what I do is I provide their readings for the week, our actual Black codes that were used after the Civil War in a couple different states. How did they limit the freedom of African Americans? So then I try to encourage some creativity, but I also encourage that they maintain academic standards. Sometimes I feel like discussion board forums can be very informal, and I'm all for encouraging discussion, but I also think they need to maintain and remember grammar, spelling, punctuation, and the basics. So another tool that I've started using in my discussion board forums I think helps meet our requirements for teaching, but also encourage and give opportunities for some of the other goals that I'll have is discussion board starters. So this is a thread that I'll post usually Monday or Tuesday right at the beginning of the week, and I post it as my own thread, kind of, you know, like the kids do with their initial post. And then each discussion board, it addresses and either gives further information, points to different kinds of sources, but encourages them hopefully to think about the topic a little more. This particular one, I look at Jim Crow laws, which will come after the Black codes. And as you can see, it kind of helps me also like transition them into thinking about Jim Crow laws and how they played an example. And another thing that it does when we get to our outcomes, I'm going to talk about a little bit too, is at the bottom of each post, I find some visuals to add into the post to hopefully get the students a little more excited. I find that sometimes students respond better to visual history than they do to just a lot of writing. So these are the visuals that would go at the bottom of the previous post. And then the third tool I use to effectively encourage discussion and hopefully meet the goals that I've set for myself for that discussion board is the responses I give to students. So this is a particular response that I use, and it talks, as you can see in the beginning, about the Black codes. I quote the source directly, which hopefully encourages them to use primary sources, both paraphrasing and directly in their work. And then in it, I talk both about sometimes they got some rights and they also, you know, got their rights taken away. And then at the end, I end with some open questions that will give them a chance to connect Black codes to the Jim Crow laws. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about how I model APA formatting and how that helps us with outcomes 1 and 3 being tied directly into our classroom. So outcomes 1 and 3, outcome 1 is communication, express and interpret ideas clearly using a variety of written, oral, and visual forms. So as I said, I try to use quotes, paraphrasing, I use visuals in my discussion boards, and all those are a way to show them and encourage them to use outcome 1 and clearly communicate by using multiple tools. And then outcome 3 is ethical and social responsibility. Express ethical and social implications in one's social, professional, artistic, and or scholarly practice. And what I do, how I do that is citing the sources. So you saw in my previous slide that I had both paraphrasing and direct quotes, and the direct quote had a correctly formatted APA formatting at the end of it in the in-text citation. And then I also include reference at the bottom of the paper too, to hopefully show them that not only do I require them to use the APA formatting, but I also do it myself. So it's modeling good, ethical, and responsible use of the sources. So again, as I said, I'm using this to demonstrate a couple different things that I'm doing. And again, this is the area where I have a direct quote, and you can see one thing that I like to do is use electronic sites or other sites that don't necessarily fall in. Lots of kids will know the traditional APA formatting, which is author, comma, date, comma, P, period, page number. And unfortunately, anyone who uses sources knows they don't always fall into that. So you can see right here that, there is, we had to use a title instead. There's no actual date for this one. And that I had to use the paragraph number because it was a website and there was no page numbers. So the next one I'm going to talk about is outcome 2. So outcome 2 is critical and creative thinking using different modes of disciplinary and interdisciplinary inquiry to explore ideas and issues from multiple perspectives. So again, what I try to do is at the end, as I said, I wrap up with kind of an open-ended question, and I do that with all my responses, have questions at the end. And I actually encourage my students in the first week that even though clearly I've addressed this to Danielle because I would be responding directly to Danielle, Danielle's not the only one who can respond to this. Everyone can read these questions, put critical and creative thinking into it, and then respond with what I hope are open-ended questions. And another thing that I try to do is include, I have a lot of social work and criminal justice majors, and I teach a civil rights class, the history of civil rights, and then I teach the history of social welfare. So I try and tie their ideas, and I encourage them, if they can relate the subject to their major, to talk about those topics, and hopefully that creates some interdisciplinary inquiry. So the last piece of effective discussion boards I'm going to be talking about is giving effective feedback. And I'm going to talk a little bit about rubrics and how to add them into the classroom. I'm only going to do it briefly because I know Jonathan already gave us a great webinar on that, but I just kind of wanted to go over a little bit of my own ideas and how I do that. So I am talking about effective feedback and outcome 1 and outcome 2. So first, outcome 1 is communication, express and interpret ideas clearly, use a variety of oral and visual forms. But part of that in the little subsections we have is apply the basic mechanics of language, syntax, grammar, punctuation effectively. So again, I know discussion board forums are a little more informal, but I think they're also a really good chance to start addressing clear communication and how important that is. So I recently, in the last few terms, added I added a little part at the end where I talked about that the post was clear and contained no errors. I also added what, in my opinion, is a little ethical responsibility in that I require academic sources. I don't necessarily count off if they don't include a source, But if they include a source, it needs to be academic, no wiki sources, anything like that. So that gets outcome 1 in my feedback. And then for outcome 2, it's critical and creative thinking. And like I said, the bullet point on that one is to assess ideas, research, and or theories presented by others. So I think we have a perfect opportunity when we encourage them to participate in their own discussions. We have a great opportunity because we have this section here, which is the frequency of participation. And recently I even added the exact wording from outcome 2. I added about how they want to assess research, assess ideas, research, and theories presented by others. And I think that does a couple things. One, clearly it connects to the outcome, but I think it makes our discussion boards more effective because I'm sure I'm not the only one that has trouble with them constantly having short, unsubstantial answers. I agree. Thank you so much. I appreciate your feedback, anything like that. And hopefully what this does, it gives them an opportunity to really dig deep and actually assess the ideas of others, not just, encouraging them, which is great, but we need more than that sometimes. So just real quick, like I said, I know Jonathan already went over how to add this, but I just wanted to show you, here's the graded rubric that he talked about, the drop down. Here is my rubric added to the discussion board forum in the grade book. And just a couple things I wanted to point out. What I found was easiest was to add all my criterion, add all of my definitions, and then I worked on the math at the top, because as you can see, you kind of have to finagle sometimes with the numbers to get the numbers here to reflect what you want. So I have 6.7 and 3.65 so that the numbers would add up to what I had. And then this is what the discussion board looks like in the actual, when you're grading, not the setup. And I've already spoken to a student, so that way when we're in the live webinar, she's given me permission to use hers, and we can do some clicking around, and hopefully I can work with and show people if they have any questions about how exactly this works. So thank you guys for your time and watching my short video, and I look forward to seeing you at the end of May for our webinar. Have a great day.